Hello and welcome to another episode of Tonique's Politics Refresh. As always, I'm Robert D'Alessandro, one of the co-hosts. Unfortunately, this week, my co-host Matt is he's a little under the weather, so we are joined instead by Elaine. How are you doing, Elaine?
I'm good. I'm the stand-in for the week.
Well, thank you for joining me, and let's jump right in to some politics. So a couple of weeks ago, we did a story about the migrant crisis unfolding at our border. Some people have called it a crisis. The Biden administration has been very careful to not do so. Significant revelations have come out since we last chatted about this. Not only has it been confirmed by both the Biden administration and multiple news sources that while this surge in migration across the U.S. border is significant and larger than any of the last in the 15 years, it is also following a cyclical nature, and the fact that a pandemic restricted flow across the border last year leads this to be more of just a larger than average year, not because of anything that Biden is doing. Additionally, and of particular interest to me, Biden's press conference was heavily featuring this issue, and he was able to really well deflect and make his case for how he's handling things. I think anyway, his reception in the media has been great. We're going to play a clip of that right now, and you can see what you think for yourself.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. You've said over and over again that immigrants shouldn't come to this country right now. This isn't the time to come. That message is not being received. Instead, the perception of you that got you elected as a moral, decent man is the reason why a lot of immigrants are coming to this country and entrusting you with unaccompanied minors. How do you resolve that tension? And how are you choosing which families can stay and which can go, given the fact that even though with Title 42, there are some families that are staying? And is there a timeline for when we won't be seeing these overcrowded facilities run by CPB when it comes to unaccompanied minors?
Well, look, I guess I should be flattered. People are coming because I'm the nice guy. That's the reason why it's happening. That I'm a decent man, or however it's phrased. That's why they're coming, because Biden's a good guy. Truth of the matter is, nothing has changed. As many people came, 28% increase in children to the border in my administration, 31% in the last year in 2019 before the pandemic in the Trump administration. It happens every single solitary year. There is a significant increase in the number of people coming to the border in the winter months of January, February, March. It happens every year. In addition to that, there is and by the way, does anybody suggest that there was a 31% increase under Trump because he was a nice guy and he was doing good things at the border? That's not the reason they're coming. The reason they're coming is that it's the time they can travel with the least likelihood of dying on the way because of the heat in the desert, number one. Number two, they're coming because of the circumstances in country. In country. The way to deal with this problem, and I started to deal with it back when I was United States Vice President, putting together a bipartisan plan of over $700 million to do with the root causes of why people are leaving. What did Trump do? He eliminated that funding. He didn't use it. He didn't do it. And in addition to that, what he did, he dismantled all the elements that exist to deal with what had been a problem and has been continued to be a problem for a long time. He, in fact, shut down the number of beds available. He did not fund HHS to get the children out of those Border Patrol facilities where they should not be and not supposed to be more than a few days, a little while. But he dismantled all of that. And so what we're doing now is attempting to rebuild the system that can accommodate what is happening today. And I'd like to think it's because I'm a nice guy, but it's not. It's because of what's happened every year. Let me say one other thing on this. If you take a look at the number of people who are coming, the vast majority The overwhelming majority of people coming to the border and crossing are being sent back.
Did you move too quickly to roll back some of the executive orders of your predecessor?
First of all the policies that are underway were not helping at all. Did not slow up the amount of immigration and as many people coming. And rolling back the policies of separating children from their mothers, I make no apology for that. Rolling back the policies of remain in Mexico, sitting on the edge of the Rio Grande in a muddy circumstance with not enough to eat, I make no apologies for that. I make no apologies for ending programs that did not exist before Trump became president, that have an incredibly negative impact on the law, international law, as well as on human dignity. And so I make no apologies for that.
And then also, Elaine, you wrote about this recently. Check it out on Tonique if you haven't, but I'd love to get your opinion.
So yeah, I covered the 20-year high, and it is true that the migrant surge is not really a surge. It's typical in the winter months because it's easier to get across because of the weather, not as hot. But there is a rise in unaccompanied children that's coming across, which I think is a lot to do with Title 42 that Trump put in. And Title 42 closed the border indefinitely and made it so that people couldn't come across because of the public health crisis, because of coronavirus. But Biden is letting children in unaccompanied, which Trump wasn't doing, which has led to parents sending their children across knowing that they're going to be settled and get a place in a migrant camp over in Texas. So I think that's one major difference that I do think has created an uptake in numbers, but I agree with everything else you said.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that, treating people with some humanity instead of, caging them or, any other countless horrors that occurred under the Trump administration at the border. I do think that, as world leaders, we, as the U.S., have a certain responsibility to try to do our best in terms of humanitarian issues. However, that also, there is some, at some level, people will try to make their own lives better. And, under a Democrat, under someone who clearly cares more. I was particularly interested in the fact that Biden isn't really allowing press into the, into these camps. What do you think about that?
I don't think that's a good reflection on him, but I did see that I think it was a Texas journalist was allowed in and he took some photos, and they don't bode well. There's no social distancing. They're the same foil type blankets that the Trump administration gave the kids, and they're pretty caged in, as you would say. It doesn't change much from, and I know they're using the same facilities that the Trump administration used, which I guess is what they've got for now, but I don't think it reflects well.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, Biden has talked about how not only is this this surge in migrants was, well, it could be expected, it's larger than it was expected to be, and that the Trump administration basically spent years tearing down all the infrastructure to deal with migrants coming across the border because they just figured, we can just continuously send them back or shut the borders permanently or, treat people worse and then they won't come. So he's trying to, you're jumpstarting a project, right, to build all this infrastructure to care for migrants in a way that's more humane, but you can't do it overnight. So it's one of these, it's one of these things that the right is having a field day with, but at the same time, it's also interesting because the Republican constituency doesn't, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that they do not want these people treated humanely, right? I mean, build the wall is one of those slogans. What do you think?
I do agree, and I think I read somewhere that it seems to be that now the wall isn't being constructed. That mindset is being placed along border patrol, border guards. Even in Mexico's National Guard, there's quite a big story about them pushing back against the Northern Triangle migrants trying to come over. They're trying to stop it. They're trying to stop people from getting into the US through Mexico now instead of just at the US southern border, which I think is a big progress, maybe. Not a good one, but I think it might be something that I didn't hear about in the Trump administration.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting to me because, there have always been, there are always people that are trying to cross this border. They're, just like almost any other border in the world. But, the U.S. has spent a considerable amount of our time and resources in when we're intervening or like helping or supporting different regimes in South America, not exactly making it a more stable region. That's probably an understatement. So this is kind of like our fruit to bear in a way. And, it's not as good, but at least there's someone in charge who wants to do something about it and make it better. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, we can just move right along into our next topic if you want. We are going to talk a little bit about Ukraine and Russia. There are massive troop movement and buildup along the Ukrainian border that Putin clearly is signing off on. This is a clear act of aggression towards the U.S. And, while Ukraine is not a member of NATO, it certainly is, it's trying to become one and is, it's posturing in a way that we are continuously allied with it, we being the U.S. I know you're across the pond. But I'd love to get your perspective as a European, as someone that isn't directly involved in the antagonistic relationship between U.S. and Russia, but someone who kind of has to rely, like someone whose country and union have to rely on both of them. More so the U.S., of course, but like with oil and security threats in the region, Russia is certainly a player.
Yeah, my immediate thought on it was that it was a sort of power play to Biden, that Russia they still have power. They didn't need a relation with Trump. They don't need a relation with the US to prove that they can take back things that they want. I reckon that it was a power play. It's a threat more than an invasion. I think it's a threat.
Yeah, I think it's a threat too. I feel like it's kind of empty, right? Because are you really going to start a war right now? Is that in your best interest as a nation, right? You have huge economic deals going on across Europe and in the Middle East. Do you really want to upset all of that?
Yeah, I don't know, because I think the ceasefire reached 2019 maybe. But I read that the ceasefire is broken dozens of times every day. So I'm sure. Yeah, the conflict is still on the down low, but I don't know if they want to fully fledge things up again.
Yeah, do you really want to? That's the thing, is even if the ceasefire is continuously broken by small militant bands, do you really want to ramp this up in a way where you would be progressing to a live war? And I mean, this is coming off the backs of something that wasn't really covered in U.S. politics at the time, but Russia actually had to broker a peace deal in around. My geography is a little bit off, but they just had to broker a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So it's one of these things where the more chaos you throw into a region like that, I feel like the more unstable it's going to become. And that might benefit Russia in some ways, but they need Crimea. They need that access. They need that port. I don't have a great understanding of why the Arctic troops are getting so much coverage and movement right now. But I assume we'll be hearing more about that in the coming days. And also, something interesting that happened today was was Putin signing into law that he can run for president or be president, or term extension limit until 2036.
Yeah, it's quite questionable. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be decades of him running the country, right? And I think more than anything else, it shows you the staying power of these authoritarian nations now. whether it's Putin or Erdogan or Xi Jinping, these are autocrats who have consolidated power within just their hands, not a party, not an idea, but them.
Yeah, my concern was that there might be a domino effect of, oh, he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Then we've got all these low-key dictators running around.
Well, there's certainly been a trend towards authoritarianism in the world in general, right? There's a period of democratization, and I personally think when we look at history, you can see a kind of, like an ebb and flow in both directions. I think, you can look at something like the Arab Spring and see a real boon for democracy in the 2013 to 2016, 2017. Whether or not it actually finished playing out, there was one actual democracy created, but there was not great progress. However, there were several dictators removed, right? There was, Saddam Hussein was removed, Gaddafi was removed by the U.S., but now we're seeing, Eastern European countries, you can probably speak to this more than I can, that are trending more towards the hard right and towards authoritarianism.
Yeah, I think the one most on the UK's radar was definitely Poland with I think it was the anti-homosexual laws first areas I think they made, and then the anti-abortion laws. But then there's been protests in the UK recently, and they're saying that our government is taking a step towards authoritarianism with the new police laws, which I do kind of agree with. So I don't know if it's just Europe is slightly edging more right as a whole, especially Eastern Europe though. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know completely, but I think that is definitely taking on trend.
Well, I'd love to talk about the police reform that's going on in London, where they would the way the law is written currently and has a real chance at passing is that police can crack down on and eliminate the right to protest. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so currently there was a Public Order Act of 1986 that they've been following ever since, and I think you can only tell protesters that they've broken the law if police can prove that they informed protesters that they shouldn't be there or that they should leave before moving them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But with the new law, it says that protesters ought to have known about it, so that you can break a law about maybe being in an area or vandalizing something that you didn't know existed. So you don't know about the law, but you break the law. They're
you can be arrested for that.
Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting, right? This really reminds me of what is going on in the U.S. right now in some ways, with Republican parties across the U.S. trying to make it harder to protest or trying to make it harder to vote, because at the end of the day, this is a basic attack on your democratic freedoms of self-expression and being able to politically mobilize. There's a representative in Georgia currently who wanted to observe the signing of the bill. She's facing 8 years in prison for knocking on a door. It is terrifying.
Oh. Wait, why?
I to be honest with you, I actually don't understand that case law at all, because she's a representative. I feel like she should be able to witness the signing of this bill.
Yeah.
But I can do some research and get back to our listeners next time. But it's one of these things where it's illegal. It's not a legal form of, or they're trying to make it illegal in Florida to block roads as a form of protest. Yeah,
that was one of ours. Yeah.
It's illegal to give out water to people in voting lines, and interestingly enough, they're trying to make it so that there are restricted voting hours. Originally, I don't know if you're aware of what Souls to the Polls is, it's a black church, a predominantly black church initiative to get their members to go out and vote early.
Okay.
Those people generally vote Democrat. However, in previous years, like the Bush administration, for example, there are faith leaders in the black community that have talked extensively about how they would be like, they would search for counsel and try to come to agreements with this group. But today, the current Republican Party has completely thrown that aside. And they tried to eliminate all weekend voting, which is predominantly, they being the Republicans, they're just trying to target the groups that want them out of office.
Okay, yeah. There was talk of voter ID having to be confirmed here, but I don't know if anything's happened with that because people have said, obviously, not everyone has ID. I think the same happened in the US, right?
Yes, in some areas of the U.S., they're going to try to require more IDs or make it more stringent or something. There are many, many laws that are trying to be tackled in this way. But it's fascinating to me because they're kind of going at this with a, they're not using a scalpel. They are going at this with a machete. And they have no idea how these laws are going to actually affect voters. I think that if anything, it will be extremely motivating to Democrats. And, if a Republican, for example, thinks, oh, this law doesn't apply to me because I'm a Republican, right? That I vote well, I know what to do. And they show up and they don't have the right ID because they haven't been part of the group that's been informed by this. This is a hypothetical, but I think that when it's harder to vote, turnout's probably lower. But the people that want to make a difference, right? Those are the people that are against these laws. It's a tough time for democracy right now. Even though Biden's victory is certainly a huge step in the right direction. That's like the righting of the ship instead of it completely collapsing, if you will.
I agree. I feel like Biden, obviously, the better win, I think, personally. But I don't know. I feel like the UK government has taken a step right compared to the US, which seems to have gone a little bit more left. Which I don't know. I feel like the roles have reversed ever since the election.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right?
I don't know what's happened.
Well, it's funny because Biden, at the end of the day, Biden really won a convincing victory.
Yeah,
several million popular vote. He won by the same margin that Trump won. That Republicans talked about this being a mandate. He also won 70% of our GDP. If you just look at the states that are actually producing our economic output.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's significant in and of itself. Because it tells you where the money is. The Democrats recently broke a fundraising record for just for the first, like, I forget if it's 3 months or a month after their presidential candidate wins. That's significant. But it seems to me like the general conversation is switched left, and the general public has been, just moved a little bit left because Trump was so repugnant and hated, and also he kind of, he tore the mask off what the modern Republican Party stands for in a lot of ways. And he made that ugliness front and center and part of his campaign. But could you tell us a little bit more about the step right that Boris Johnson's government's taking? Yeah,
well, apart from that section about being ought to know the laws, there's a lot you can with protest. It's a 300-page document, the new police bill. So if you want to read it, it'll be on the internet somewhere. But people are having a problem with that. You can get more time in prison now for damaging a statue than you get for sexual assault.
What?
You can get 10 years in prison for damaging a memorial or a statue, which started, we think, because the Black Lives Matter protests in last summer, I think it was, were also over here, and the people were taking down slave trader statues, rightfully. But yeah, and then so now you can get 10 years in prison for that. But recently, I think there's been an average of around 4 years for sexual offenders, which is a lot of the reason why people are on the streets protesting massively about it. Yeah.
Have you been to any of those, or are you like privy? Are you near enough
No, I
to
live
hear
in
them?
like a small town. They're quite far away from me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, good, right? This
Okay.
is we have to do this. People have to do this. I hope everyone's wearing a mask and staying safe. But this is it's so important. Democratic freedoms in this world, especially while they're under siege, need to be protected at all costs. I am disgusted every day by what's going on in Republican-controlled areas and how they decide to go about destroying democracy on a daily basis. We can move to a really fun topic. Well, not a fun topic, but an amusing topic at the very least. If do you know who Matt Gaetz is?
I don't. I feel like there's someone in my mind, but I don't know if it's the right person. So go for it.
So he's a member of Congress. He's a Republican. I think he's 38. Recently this week, he has been brought up on charges of. He has not been brought up on charges. He is currently under investigation by the DOJ for sex trafficking a minor across state lines.
I saw this.
Yeah.
I saw this. Yeah. I did see this on Twitter.
And there's so much to this, whether it's the reports of him using ecstasy and sleeping with prostitutes, or the reports of him, just showing nude pictures to other members of Congress on the floor of the chamber. He cries that this is a hoax. But the interesting thing is, this was started under Trump's DOJ. This was started under Barr, and they are notorious. They were notorious in doing political favors for the people that Trump worshipped, and they didn't do anything for him, which is fascinating to me. Not the people that Trump worshipped, but the people that worship Trump. And I'd love to make 2 points, and then you get your reaction to them. First of all, QAnon is remarkably silent on all of this when there is an actual, credible account of a member of Congress, trafficking in children. That is something that is happening, and this conspiracy theory that is based on this claim that politicians are pedophiles, is completely ignoring it. And there's just no attention given to it at all. I don't know how familiar you are with QAnon. I feel like it's got a global influence to some extent.
I don't know. I've read bits here and there, but I don't quite know what they are and what they do.
I don't really either. You kind of have to know enough at this point because they come up so much in terms of the Republican base. But yeah, there's a great SNL skit about it that just came out last night, so I'll send that your way.
Is it headline news?
It is headline news. It's headline news
good.
here
That's
every day because I keep getting whether it's every news organization except Fox. Yeah, of course, right? I mean, Fox is the only news organization that I could find that headline news was Trump is calling for an MLB boycott.
Oh yeah, yeah.
which is
Coca-Cola too. I saw that one.
yeah, Coca-Cola. And I mean, is he going to stop flying on Delta? Who knows?
Okay.
But that's actually in and of itself very interesting, because this is going to actually test how important Trump's going to be in his post-presidential life, right? Whether he's just screaming into the wind or if his followers are still with him. Do you have any predictions on that? I know it's kind of a tough one.
I don't know. I can't see them boycotting major brands.
Right?
I can't see that. And to be honest, I don't think Trump is on the global radar anymore, because there's been not one. I haven't seen a bit of news about him over here, apart from Twitter, which is global anyway.
Yeah.
But like headlines here, not people. No, but
I mean, that's great, right?
Like on Twitter, I wouldn't have known.
Well, the funny thing is, his getting rid of his Twitter almost completely shutting him out of the national conversation, and I imagine destroyed him internationally.
Yeah.
But there have been some reports that he's going to invest in a social media company and try to make, like the new Parler or whatever. And that wouldn't shock me. I think that's a very plausible back to conversing with his base regularly, which would probably be a major deal for him. But, the most recent headline about Trump I saw was that his campaign donors are all really upset because he had a fine print agreement in the terms and conditions or like in some tiny part of their website where it said, we can bill you monthly based on your donation total, even if you select it is a one-time donation. So they were
I did see
stealing money.
Yeah, I saw that people who was it general supporters of Trump that gave their money money just taken out of their account.
Exactly.
I was like, well, is that legal?
I think it's legal, but I don't, because if you agree to it in any part of the donation process, right? Even if it is a footnote within like page 10 of the term of the condition, whatever. But it's scummy. It does not warrant future trust from constituents, right?
Do you think he'll run again?
I'm kind of mixed on that. I can see it going both ways. I could see him running again. I think he'd get obliterated by Biden.
Okay, do you think there should be an age limit on presidency?
That's a really hard question because there are age restrictions on who can be president, who can be a representative. You have to be of a certain age.
Yeah.
And my initial leaning is that I see the merits in it. However, when you start to really restrict who can hold that job, I worry that is a slippery slope to further restricting other things. I think in a vacuum, putting a cap on it would be a good idea. Just because it would, there's a prevailing sentiment in the U.S. that it's like it's your turn to run, right? It was Hillary's turn to run in 2016. She lost to Obama in the 2008 primary, and they kept everyone else out of the primary. And we ran a weak candidate against Donald Trump because of that. And I think that if there was a age limit on the top, that probably would go away. But it's hard because, even if you are the president, right? Like, there's such a large supporting cast around you that, even if you're way up there like Biden, he is still getting a lot done. And I mean, if he passes this infrastructure deal that I would love to see passed just based on all the amazing things that are in it, then he's accomplished more in his first year than Trump did in all four, which is remarkable.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Elaine, thank you so much for joining me and chatting. And do you have anything you want to plug for La Tonique?
My US border article is out, and my article about the UK police bill is coming out soon.
Check them both out. They are fantastic on La Tonique under the politics section. I am Robert D'Alessandro. Thank you again, Elaine, and we will see you next week.